Yes, welcome back to Phone Lookout. Thanks for watching our videos. So today I'm just going to show you something very simple, and that's how to change the screen of the Tecno Camon CA6. It's a bit of a rare phone, and worn through thick and thin to actually access its screen, and it's unreasonably expensive. In fact, even more expensive than the screen of the Camon 12, and I think even the Camon 15 has a cheaper screen. Anyway, unfortunately for you guys, I have already opened this phone, but I will just go through the steps in retrospect so you know what to do. So to open this phone, first you have to eject the SIM card tray, and of course that is by using a pin, and it comes out. The SIM card tray actually doubles as also the memory card tray, so all of them fit into one thing. Now, as for the back cover, it's held onto the chassis of the phone using a lock and key mechanism. So all you'll need is a surgical blade and get in between and pry it apart, and that will lift out. Now, for this one, in as much as it has a fingerprint at the rear, I don't have to worry about it because it's not glued on the back glass. Usually, whenever you have a fingerprint at the back, you have to open the back plastic carefully because it may be glued to the back cover and may end up causing you to tear the fiber that connects it to the main motherboard. Anyway, this comes out cleanly like this. Now, to be able to access the screen or remove the old screen, we have to first remove the battery. I hope this goes without saying that this also helps show you how you would change your battery, just in case. I know a lot of people always keep thinking inbuilt batteries are non-replaceable. It's just that it's a bit harder to replace and therefore requires someone who is good with gadgets, probably a technician. But anyway, do not fear, even you can replace it if you actually are able to land on the replacement battery. So anyways, this is where the fiber that goes into the LCD touch combination passes underneath the battery and down to the bottom part of the screen. So it's inevitable you'll have to remove this. Anyway, why my screen is already on the frame of the phone, it's because I needed to test the screen before I had to buy it, before I could pay for it. But let me see if I can show you the old one. Do I see it? Anyway, so this is the old screen. It was pressed and the liquid crystal layer was affected. In other words, the LCD anyways. It's a bit fragile, either under drop or excessive compression. It always affects mostly this lower part where the fibers enter into the screen layer itself. So this is how it is, and this is the so-called complete screen. Complete simply means that the touch or digitizing layer is fused to the display or LCD layer. The display layer, of course, forms the pictures. Now, how you would remove the old screen would be that you would actually have to heat the peripheries of the screen up to a temperature of about 95 to 100 degrees Celsius. But also, if you wanted to transplant a screen, I wouldn't advise exceeding 100 degrees C and not keeping it there for more than 10 minutes. But since this was already dead screen, it didn't matter that much. But again, don't get overly excited that since the screen is dead, you will apply as much heat as you wish. Now, there is actually an earpiece right here and has a plastic membrane for diaphragm. You also do not want to deform that under high temperature. That's why 95 degrees to 100 degrees is recommendable. I personally use a screen separator, which is simply a hot plate with a controllable temperature, so I can set and know that I'm precisely using 90 degrees. However, if you happen to be at home and you have a hot air gun, you could also use that. Earlier on, I used to use a flat iron, but would set it at the lowest ironing temperature. But that also depends on how much intuition you're willing to apply in solving the problem. Now, when hitting the battery with a hot plate, so the screen with a hot plate, remove it. That also helps soften the glue underneath this battery, making it quite easy to pry out the battery from the frame. That's also another reason why you shouldn't leave it on the heat plate for very long, because these lithium-ion batteries are not supposed to be subjected to very high temperatures for very prolonged times. So anyway, this battery should be able to come off, but before you attempt to rip it out, you will have to notice two things here. The battery is restrained, the battery's connector is restrained onto the motherboard using this piece of plastic, which you'll have to unscrew. However, that piece of plastic is under the fingerprint sensor, and this fingerprint sensor also comes and plugs in underneath here. Therefore, we will have to begin with this plate that restrains the LCD or screen fiber into the socket. So let's open this, and that plate will come out. Now when this plate comes out, you can see right under here that the connector for the fingerprint is out. My fingerprint is coming off easily because I already removed it earlier on, but it's held into place by adhesive, so you'll need some warm air to weaken the adhesive so you can pick it out without ripping its fiber. After having removed the fingerprint sensor, you'll notice that there is a screw underneath, so it's concealed. That's why I usually encourage that you use a bit of intuition when you meet resistance. There's likely something that you haven't removed, and that's how I got to know there was a screw underneath there. But lucky for you, you get to know it up front. That's the very reason I encourage that you watch the videos till the end before you attempt anything. There are precautionary steps that may be hidden within segments of the video. So this piece of plastic comes out like that, and just like that, we've exposed our connector for the LCD and also the battery connector. Now before removing the LCD connector, I encourage that you remove the battery first. You never know what could happen. You could actually short your motherboard because the battery is giving it power and you're placing metal objects in wrong places. Now my battery is able to come out easily because I had removed it earlier on with some bit of it, so it's held by simply adhesive here and adhesive here and there. I discourage using solvent because the screen type being LCD, it has a backlighting layer membranes, and water liquid could easily go into those layers and leave patches that make your display look very ugly. So unplug the connector of the LCD. It comes all the way. It's actually held onto the frame by these patches of adhesive. These are like double-sided tape. Now having said that, let's get our screen out and prepare it for being entirely secured onto the frame of the phone. I believe you might want to see how my replacement screen looks like. This replacement screen went for roughly 35 USD, which is roughly 120 Ugandan shillings. But you can imagine that the other models, the more flagship Camons, like this Camon 12, the screen is actually 80, which is a bit strange. So at times you might get your screen relatively more expensive because of its availability, and this didn't seem like a very popular model per se, so very few people anticipate that the parts would be asked for, so very few people stock them. Anyways, enough of that. But before you proceed to actually secure your phone onto the screen, you have to clean the two surfaces that are going to be bonded together. Lucky for me, the replacement screen surface is already clean enough. However, for the frame of the phone or the chassis, it's a bit unclean, so I have to remove the old glue from the old screen. I'm going to just wipe that off. Let me use some bit of isopropyl to make it a bit removable. Okay, so that's my liquid. Put it right there. dissolve and soften that. Unfortunately, I can't locate my surgical blade. I may have to improvise in trying to remove this. Okay, I believe that's sufficient. Now, one thing that I know that is usually true is the fact that a better bond is formed whenever I apply adhesive on both layers that have to be bonded together. And I normally use this adhesive. This is rubberized glue for screen replacement. Previously I used to use the B7000, but it doesn't form a very strong bond. However, the E8000 is of impeccable performance, so that's what you should look out for in case you are going to the hunt for screens. So I'll begin by applying some to the chassis, and so I tend to begin with the peripheries. Run it down, and be careful not to put excessive adhesive. Why I encourage that you do not put excessive adhesive is since these phones, unlike the Samsung phones, have relatively cheaper screens, you might wish to replace the screen again the second time in the event of breaking it, so you do not want to put a lot of adhesive and make your life miserable the next time you want to change it. I have noticed that this amount of adhesive is always just sufficient to form the best bond. So the reason why I put on both surfaces is because when the glue is still molten, it easily adheres to an opposite material, but when it starts hardening, it's harder for it to adhere to the surface. However, if two surfaces of relatively semi-solid glue are brought together, they tend to have a stronger cohesive force that keeps them together. So yeah, it's strange, but those results are purely empirical. Now, one other thing you want to remember to do is remove this blue membrane. I think it's just added as a protective layer, but you will remove it because you want to reduce on the overall thickness of the screen, such that when you bond it with the frame, the screen sits flush with the surface of the frame, the front surface. So apply a veneer of glue all around the peripheries to this side. Don't mind my camera vibrations. I am working in a relatively confined space, so occasionally I will hit my camera holder, so you bear with that. Peripheries. Anyway, these are things you can actually do in the confines of your home. All you need to be able to do is be as clinical as possible and anticipate failure mechanism within which replacement screens might fail. I've seen most people castigate replacement screens, and yet it was an issue of improper placement, and therefore leaving the screen very susceptible to failure, let alone the screen already being of a relatively lower quality than the originals. And never be deceived that you can get an original screen from the manufacturer unless you got it from a used phone. These are usually third parties that try to bridge that gap, and you will find about 3 qualities on the market. And yes, okay, so I will give these 2 surfaces an extra minute. Of course, the latter surface, the older one, has already spent some time drying. That's to help it to do an initial set such that it's not extremely fluid and ending up everywhere. Okay, and I think I'll let the camera roll, so we wait together the 1 minute. Anyway, if you're new to the channel, please do hit the subscribe button. I feel it's the least you could do for us, and please like, share and comment. I'll be glad to answer your questions. So what else could I really add? Oh, by the way, all of you who are subscribed, yeah, you do actually mean a lot. Okay, see, when I try to touch this with the glove, I meet very little opposite force pulling me down, meaning it has relatively hardened. So having had the solvent of the glue evaporate a bit, now I can place it in. So when you look at that hole right there, that slit at the bottom, that's where you will insert your fiber. Plug it right in and then align the phone. This glue is relatively strong, so you want to align it very well before you actually sit it onto the frame permanently. You do not want to have to undo it. And besides, having to do things at the first shot normally produces the best results, both aesthetically and functionally. Having done this, I will be quick to assemble the other parts because I have to restrain the screen in place for the glue to set, so I do not want it to harden me very quickly. So let's try to rush through these bits of space as we try to ensure the glue hasn't already started hardening beyond the level where I can compress it further. Now plug in the fiber connector into the socket. Press this down to hold on to the adhesive that was left behind by the original screen that was seated here. Having done that, we will bring our battery into place, but since we had tried this out, we will have to apply some new adhesive. So assuming you had to replace your battery and we say this is a new battery, this is what you would do. Apply adhesive right here. You don't want to apply it on the battery because you do not want the adhesive holding onto the fiber, so the next time you have to really suffer. Place it exactly where the old glue was placed, making sure it does not touch any of the fibers, because the next time you want to change your battery and it's glued onto the fiber, you will rip out your fiber, and that's a cost you wouldn't want to incur. Let alone you may even have to forego the phone, seeing that fibers are not the commonest things of late. Okay, let's press our screen in place. Plug in that's the battery, not screen, the battery. Plug it into the socket. Having plugged it into the socket, bring our gentleman right there. That's the restraints for the battery connector. Get our screws. I feel like I'm moving slowly and the glue is not waiting for me, so let me be a bit rash here. That's the first of the battery holding screws. The second is also right there in place. This other one that was earlier on concealed under the fingerprint sensor is also in place. Get your fingerprint sensor, apply a bit of more adhesive where it should be received, and place it in place. Having placed it in place, connect this fiber into the socket. Bring the plate that restrains its fiber and that of the screen into their respective sockets on the motherboard. Why these restraints are provided for is because occasionally, in the event of serious faults, these connectors tend to jam.